Welcome to the Books of Titans podcast hosted by Eric Rostad. Join him on his 15-year journey through the immortal books. He'll share what he's learning, explore profound ideas across time and cultures, and share the one thing he always hopes to remember from each immortal book.
Today I'm going to cover Euthyphro, a dialogue by Plato. This is from book 29 from my 2025 reading list. Well, I've decided to read through the complete works of Plato, and this is the first dialogue in that set. This one takes place in the Agora, which is the marketplace in Athens. And Socrates is on his way to the magistrate. He has to answer charges of impiety. And it's a twofold charge. We're very familiar with the one charge of corrupting the youth, but there's another charge where Socrates is charged with creating new gods while not believing the old gods. And on his way to the magistrate, Socrates meets Euthyphro. And Euthyphro is going to the magistrate as well to prosecute his own father because his father has murdered a servant. And Euthyphro is portrayed as a prophet. He's able to tell what is going to happen in the future. And he's also someone who knows what pious is or what pious is not, what the impious are. And so you wonder if that's the case, or if Socrates is just kind of playing with him as putting him up as someone who knows this, but what we see is he really doesn't know this. But here's what people in Athens are saying about Euthyphro, and Euthyphro himself is saying this, that hey Socrates, here's what people are saying. And so it goes like this: Euthyphro, you think that your knowledge of the divine and of piety and impiety is so accurate that when these things happened, as you say, you have no fear of having acted impiously in bringing your father to trial? End quote. So that's the question that is posed by the people of Athens to Euthyphro. And so in this dialogue, we just have these two going back and forth, Socrates and Euthyphro. And Socrates is asking questions along these lines because Socrates has a huge stake in the answer. So whether Socrates is just kind of playing with Euthyphro to see if he can get a definition out of him, or if he really does want to know the definition of impiety, because he's about to go before the magistrate to answer on that charge of impiety. So Socrates does have a stake in the sense of being able to argue his own case. And so this entire dialogue hinges upon one word, and that word is the Greek word hosios, which is where we get the translation for the word is piety, holiness, goodness, could also be godliness or sinless or devout. And so I read a number of different translations of this particular dialogue. And so in the translations that I read, I saw piety, holiness, and goodness as the main words that hosios was translated to. And so that's the main topic of discussion for this particular dialogue. So in this podcast episode, I want to do a few things. One is I just want to look at and see if and how this word was used before. So was this hosios word used in Homer? Did it show up at all in the Greek Tragedies? Does it show up in the Bible when we're talking about similar ideas? And then I want to look at the main arguments in this particular dialogue, and then how Socrates responds to each of the arguments put forward by Euthyphro. And then I'll close out this episode with the one thing I always hope to remember from this particular dialogue. So real quickly, I want to go through the versions I read, and I just planned to read one version, but I had trouble with it. And so I ended up reading 4 different versions. And I do that because it really helps me. It helps me to see how different people have translated particular words. So in this case, hosios, but there's also a number of other concepts and ideas and words in this dialogue. So just seeing how other people translated it kind of, it gives another scope to the word or to the argument. And it really helps me, especially with this being my first philosophical dialogue by Plato that I'm reading. So I started off with the version of the complete works of Plato, and this is the one that's edited by John M. Cooper. This came heavily suggested to me when I asked about this on Twitter X of which versions should I read of Plato. I heard over and over, get the John M. Cooper complete works and go through that. So this was translated by Grube, G-M-A Grube. And then the second version I read was the Penguin Classics. And this is from the book called The Last Days of Socrates. So it contains 5 different plays, and four different plays, and that one was translated by Hugh Tredennick and Harold Tarrant, and Tarrant did the intro for that one as well. I then was very pleasantly surprised to look in my closet, and I've got some Loeb classical library books, so those green ones, and I've just collected some over the years. If I see them in a bookstore for a good price, I'll pick them up. But there's no rhyme or reason to which ones I have, and I have forgotten which ones I have unless I go in and kind of just look. And lo and behold, I had the Plato Volume 1 for this Loeb classical library, and the first one in there is Euthyphro. So I was very happy I had that and pulled some good stuff out of that version. So that was number 3. Number 4 was the Collected Dialogues version that is edited by Edith Hamilton and Huntington Cairns. And that one was translated by Lane Cooper. The Loeb Classical Library one was translated by Harold North Fowler. So I read 4 different translations. I'll highlight a book later on that I plan to read after all this to go into Euthyphro a little deeper here. So you may ask, why in the world did you read this 4 times? What is the matter with you? And one, it's just 16 pages, so it's a rather quick read. It's not an easy read, at least not for me. And so just that it's 16 pages, I just kept reading it over and over to get into it. I had the same thing happen when I started reading the Greek tragedies. And I started with Aeschylus, and I had to read Aeschylus 4 times. I had to read each of his tragedy plays 4 times. And I think part of it is my brain, if I'm moving to a new genre, so in this case, Greek philosophy, it just takes me a little time to get into it. There's a certain set of rules of how things go. There's a flow to it. There's a way that these things work. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with taking that time just to get into that mode, because I know the time that I spend reading it and rereading it will pay dividends as I go deeper into Plato here. And as I'm planning to read all of his dialogues, I don't want to not understand the very first one and to move on from there. So yeah, I didn't understand every single thing in this dialogue, but I did want to take the time and really understand it as best I could. And so that was a second reason of why. The third reason is I've had this happen since I remember it happening in college. I did take one philosophy course in college, and we did read some Plato, and I recall having what I just call brain freeze. So, like when you eat ice cream and your brain just, it gets cold and like it hurts, and they call that brain freeze. Well, I get this thing called brain freeze, or what I call brain freeze, where if there's a argument I don't understand, or if somebody's talking and I don't understand what they're saying, my brain goes into brain freeze mode, and it just like stops, and I don't hear anything they say after that. And I don't want that to happen. I want to get past that, and especially with understanding works like this. And so there's a particular part in the middle of this dialogue where it just, the argument got so complex, I couldn't understand it. So that was the other reason I wanted to keep reading different versions. And the great thing about that is, as you read more and more versions, you start, oh, okay, I know where this argument is going, I know, but this part that I really have trouble in, I don't have to spend all my brain power on understanding the original stuff. I've got that down now. So it's like your brain can kind of focus more on the parts that you really have trouble with. And so that's why I read it 4 times. I may even read it a few more times, even after this episode, just to really get the arguments down and get it nailed down. But that's why I read it 4 times. Those are the versions I read. So in the rest of this episode, there'll be segment 2 where I go through those uses of the term and then the arguments from Euthyphro, and then segment 3 will be where I cover the one thing. Well, during college, I studied for a summer at Oxford University, and while I was there, I got the Greek-English lexicon from the Oxford University Press. And so I looked up this Hosios word in there, and they have a really nice definition for it. It's something that is sanctioned or approved by the law of God or nature. So that was another helpful way to look at this. But what I want to do now is look at what was this word hosios? Was it used in Homer? Was it used in the Greek tragedies? How is it used in the Bible? I just find that helps, especially this reading project for me, this Books of Titans and the Immortal books. I'm reading them in chronological order for the main purpose of seeing these ideas through time. So did we see this idea in Homer, and then now we see Plato taking it to another level, or was it even mentioned at all? And so I did some searches in just to see if this word showed up. And so in Homer, this word does not show up at all. It does not show up in the Iliad or the Odyssey. The ideas that we get that are, I guess, precursors to hosios is, they're ideas like honor and glory. We see that particularly in the Iliad. And then in the Odyssey, we see a lot about justice, and we kind of start seeing these concepts bubbling up. But the hosios word itself is not used in Homer. So I found that to be interesting. I did wonder if there was some sort of a connection between the will of Zeus that we're introduced to at the beginning of the Iliad, if there's some sort of a connection between the will of Zeus and hosios, just in the sense of if a human were to behave or act in line with the will of Zeus, is that a similar idea or not? That is something I've not solved. If you have a response to that, if you have a thought on that, I would love to hear it, because I want to learn if there is some sort of a connection there. But it's one idea that kind of popped up, just a curiosity if there was a connection between those two things. It does show up in Greek tragedies, which I found to be very interesting. And in particular, it shows up in Antigone by Sophocles. And so with Antigone, we've got this idea where there's kind of a man-made law, and that's personified in Creon, versus a divine law. And Antigone is doing what she says. She abides by this divine law, and the hosios word is within that divine law, and that is again contrasted against Creon in what he is putting forward as his law on what you should or shouldn't do. So that was helpful in viewing it in that way. In the Bible, it does show up a few times in the New Testament, but there are a couple words. There's hagios, which is holy, which is set apart, and from what I have gathered, that word emphasizes separation, while hosios is kind of more along that lines of the Little and Scott Greek lexicon, where it's sanctioned or approved by the law of God. So hosios in the Bible has more of this emphasis on it being approved by divine laws. Are there any words in our English language that derive from this? And there are not. I thought that might be helpful just in knowing what those words are, but there are no such words. There are words for other ideas along holiness or justice and that kind of thing, but not the hosios word, which is the focal point in this particular dialogue. So let me get into the main arguments in this dialogue. And there's kind of an overarching question that Socrates asks, and it's never answered. So sorry for the spoiler alert, but we're not going to get that answer in this dialogue. But the main question is this: do the pious and impious take on forms? So basically, is there some essential form, or is there some essence of piety that we can kind of run as a litmus test, and either we can say this thing is holy, or you are pious if you do this thing, or you are impious if you don't do this thing. Is there just some standard? Is there just some form that it takes? And while I was reading this, I was wondering, okay, is this something similar to a rule, say like the golden rule? Can you say that the golden rule would be this form? And it's not. This is something different. This is an essential form or an essence of piety. It's not a rule. It's a form. It's something else. So that was helpful, I guess, in knowing that it's not like a rule. So let me read part of the dialogue to just talk a little bit more about this main argument or this main question that is posed by Socrates to Euthyphro. And it's this: what kind of thing do you say that godliness or ungodliness are, both as regards murder and other things? Or is the pious not the same and alike in every action, and the impious the opposite of all that is pious and like itself? And everything that is to be impious presents us with one form or appearance insofar as it is impious? End quote. And so that is all a question being asked by Socrates, but the basic form is tell me then, what is the pious and what is the impious, do you say? And he asks this to Euthyphro, but he's wondering about a form. He's not wondering about specific examples. He wants the form of this thing. And so I'm going to highlight just the responses that Euthyphro gives, and then I'll tell you what Socrates responds to those responses. And so we just kind of have this back and forth between the two of them, and it's very interesting how they go about this question. So at first, the first thing Euthyphro says in response to, is there a form for piety and impiety? He says this: the pious is to do what I am doing now, to prosecute the wrongdoer, be it about murder or temple robbery or anything else, whether the wrongdoer is your father or your mother or anyone else. Not to prosecute is impious. End quote. So that's what he starts off with. Here's what is pious. Here's what is impious. The pious is to do what I'm doing. Look at me. The impious is to not prosecute like this, even if it's your own father. You've got to do what's right. And Socrates responds and says, you did not answer my question. You gave me an example, but you did not give me the form. So Euthyphro comes back and he says, well, how about this? What is dear to the gods is pious, and what is not dear to the gods is impious. And Socrates responds basically with what I'm going to call the gods are at odds. So with there being many gods in the Greek pantheon, they have different ideas about these things. And so Zeus may approve of what you're doing, but one of the other gods may not approve. So if what is dear to the gods is how you define piety and what is pious, what happens when the gods are at odds? So Euthyphro responds, well, what the gods love is pious, and what they hate is impious. And what Socrates then takes Euthyphro into is a discussion about cause and effect. So is something pious because it is loved by the gods, or is it loved by the gods because it is pious? And so with those two options there, if something is pious because it is loved by the gods, and you've got gods that are at odds, well, you've got something that's arbitrary then. It's based on feelings. One god may like it, or one god may love it, another god may not love it. So that's a really hard way to define something that is pious. Or is it loved by the gods because it is pious? So what Socrates is trying to get to here is a form of piety. And so is something loved by the gods because it has that form. And so this is more of an absolute thing as opposed to an arbitrary thing, the other way around of, is something pious because it is loved by the gods? So is it loved by the gods because it is pious? Does it have this form of piety? And Socrates kind of goes deeper into that, and he says, you have told me an effect or a quality of piety, but you have not yet told me what the pious is. So this keeps happening. Socrates is seeking this form. Euthyphro is giving him some affect or some quality of piety, but not the form itself. And so Socrates' next question is all that is pious of necessity just? Is all that is just pious? And then Socrates talks about piety being a part of justice, like shame is a part of fear. There's a few other arguments in here. The next one is that the godly and the pious is part of the just that is concerned with the care of the gods. So this is what Euthyphro is responding. So Socrates is asking, what part of justice is piety, or what part of piety is justice? And so Euthyphro says the godly and the pious is the part of the just that is a part of the just that is concerned with the care of the gods. while that concerned with the care of men is the remaining part of justice. So we've got a split here between of the parts of justice. So piety, Euthyphro says, is just one small part of this overarching justice. So if you're viewing circles, you've got this big circle of justice, and then piety would be a small circle within this larger justice. And so Euthyphro says that the pious part is the part that is concerned with the care of the gods, and the part that is concerned with the care of men is that larger justice circle. And Socrates just kind of dismisses that and scorns the idea that we can care for the gods. And so now we're left with this. If one knows how to say and do things gratifying to the gods in prayer and sacrifice, this is what is holy. And the opposite of that is unholy. So this is kind of the final thing that Euthyphro goes to. If one knows how to say and do things that are gratifying to the gods in prayer and sacrifice, so if we can say the right words, if we can do the right actions, then this is holy. If we don't say the right words in prayer, if we don't do the right things in sacrifice, that is unholy. And then Socrates responds and says, this is a similar argument to when you said what the gods approve is or what is dear to the gods is pious. And Socrates says that's a similar argument. And again, you're giving me an example, you're not giving me the form. And so the way this whole thing ends is Socrates says, if you had no clear knowledge of piety and impiety, you would have never ventured to prosecute your old father for murder on behalf of a servant. End quote. So Socrates is saying, you really don't know the difference here, and yet you are staking your prosecution of your father based on the fact that you think you know the difference between piety and impiety, and you really don't. And so Socrates says, okay, Euthyphro, we've got to start from scratch here. We've gone 16 pages and we have not solved this. Let's just scratch everything we've said. Let's start from the beginning. And then Euthyphro says, actually, I've got business elsewhere. I've got to do something else. I'm going to skedaddle. I'll see you later. And then that's where we end. And so Socrates ends without really having any resource in his defense before the magistrate. If he was expecting that at all, you get the feeling that he wasn't. He was just kind of asking Euthyphro to see if Euthyphro could define this and see if Euthyphro could answer these questions. And so that's where we close out. We've gone in some circles in this dialogue. We have not gotten to a form. We don't get a nice tidy form of holiness or godliness at the end of this dialogue, but we do get an interesting way of thinking. And so I'm going to leave it there and go into the next segment to talk about my one thing. All right, when I consider the one thing that I want to remember from this dialogue, I think if I see this book on my bookshelf and I think, what was Euthyphro about? I may remember some of the questions and what Socrates was going for, the form he was after. But what I really think I'm going to remember from this particular play, especially with it being my first one, is just the purpose of it and what the format of the dialogue itself. And in the Loeb version, in the introduction, it says this: the purpose of the dialogue is in part to inculcate correct methods of thinking. And then later on, proof that a particular example does not constitute a definition of a general concept. This is kind of what this play is showing, or not this play, but this dialogue. And so if you ask for a form and then the person responds with just particular examples, they're not answering the question. And this is what we see in this dialogue. Plato is wanting to know a form, and Euthyphro just keeps giving him example and particular example after example. And what we get here is Socrates digging deeper. He wants to know the answer, or he wants to at least get the answer out of Euthyphro, and perhaps have Euthyphro think through this of what really is the pious in this situation. What is piety? What is impiety? And if all that he can give back is particular examples, then Socrates wants to keep going. And so I love that idea. The purpose of the dialogue is in part to inculcate correct methods of thinking. And you really do that. I mean, you're reading this dialogue and I'm thinking to myself, like, how would I define this? Can I give Plato or can I give Socrates a form of everything that would be holy or everything that would be unholy or everything that would be pious and everything that would be impious? Can I do that? And it's just interesting to see how Euthyphro responds and how Socrates responds to all of that. It's also sort of a comment on the fact that there's many gods in the Greek pantheon. And this obviously comes up in the Greek tragedies quite often. The infighting, I mean, we see it in Homer too, just kind of the infighting of the gods. And so if in the Iliad there is this will of Zeus, how does that play with the will of the other gods, the will of the humans? How does all that work together? And you just see it's how hard it is to have a form or a definition from the gods in this case, when they're so much like people, and then they also have these differing motives. So in conclusion, this was a great place to start with Plato's dialogues. It was hard for me. It took me a while. I read it 4 times. I'll probably read it a few more. But I think it puts me in the right mindset now going forward. And going forward, I do plan to spend a little bit more time with Euthyphro. And so there was a book suggested to me by Leo Strauss, and it's the Notebooks of Euthyphro in the sense that Leo Strauss can put together these ideas and things he was thinking about while reading Euthyphro. And I've heard really good things about it, so I plan to go through that or part of it. And then after that, I'm just going to continue on in the other works by Plato. And so next up would be Apology, and then after that is Credo. And so I plan to cover those on upcoming podcast episodes. And again, I just work my way through all of Plato. I'm going to try to get through it by the end of this year, but if Euthyphro is any indication, that I may not make it through the 36 different works of Plato in that amount of time, but we'll see. I'm gonna go for it and see where I get. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you for listening. I'd love to hear from you about Euthyphro in particular. You can email me at eric@booksoftitans.com. If you want to comment on Euthyphro or share something that I missed or that you like to think about on this particular dialogue, please do that at the Books of Titans Substack, because then other people can see it, they can comment on it, we can get a nice conversation going there. You can follow Books of Titans on Instagram or Twitter. It's just at Books of Titans. I also have another part of the website that's at books.booksoftitans.com. That shows all of my reading lists from 2017 all the way through 2025. I have my Immortal Books list there, so that's all the books that I plan to read over the next 15 years as part of this Immortal Books project. So take a look there and see what I thought about different books and what I've read along the way. Until I'll be back next week with another work from Plato or something else that I've been reading this year. Until then, keep reading, keep learning, and keep listening. I'm out.